Let me yank you right into the churning Mediterranean night of July 9, 1943, 11:30 p.m., aboard a U.S. Army landing craft, 10 miles off the coast of Sicily. The sea's a dark, angry mess, waves slamming into the boat's sides, spray soaking your uniform, the metal hull creaking like it's begging to break. 20-year-old Private Tom Murphy, from a farm in Ohio, grips the edge of the craft with one hand, his M1 rifle with the other. His hands are sweaty, his throat dry, and he's pretty sure he's going to throw up. "Easy, kid," says Sergeant Joe Riley, a 32-year-old vet who fought in North Africa, clapping Tom on the back. "Storm's bad, but it's keeping the Krauts busy, they'll never see us coming." Tom nods, but he doesn't believe it. Everyone in the unit heard the rumors. Sicily's defenses are impenetrable. Hitler's top general in the Mediterranean, Albert Kesselring, called it a fortress in the sea. Mussolini, Italy's dictator, went on the radio just last week, yelling, "The Allies will drown in their own blood before they set foot on Sicilian soil." But here's the thing, Tom and 470,000 other Allied soldiers, American, British, Canadian, Free French, are about to prove them wrong. This is Operation Husky, the biggest amphibious invasion of World War II so far. And by the time it's over, Sicily will be in Allied hands, Mussolini will be out of power, and the Axis powers will start to crack. What Kesselring and Mussolini didn't know. The storm that's scaring Tom isn't a problem, it's a weapon. And the impenetrable defenses they bragged about? They're full of holes. To understand why Sicily matters, you gotta go back to May 1943, just 2 months before. The Allies had just won the North Africa campaign, 250,000 German and Italian soldiers surrendered in Tunisia. Now, the Mediterranean was wide open. But what next? The top Allied generals, Dwight Eisenhower, the Supreme Commander, Bernard Montgomery, the British Field Marshal, George Patton, the American Tank General, sat down in Algiers to plan. They had 3 options: invade France, attack Greece, or take Sicily. France was too well defended. Greece was too far, and the Germans could reinforce it fast. Sicily. It was perfect. It's a big island, about the size of Massachusetts, sitting at the toe of Italy's boot. Control Sicily, and you control the Mediterranean. You can send ships from Gibraltar to the Suez Canal without getting attacked. You can bomb Italy's mainland. And you can pressure Mussolini to quit the war. Eisenhower summed it up: Sicily isn't just a target. It's a sledgehammer. We'll hit Italy where it hurts, and make Hitler send troops from Russia to stop us. But the Axis wasn't sitting around. Kesselring, tall, sharp, with a scar on his cheek from World War I, was in charge of defending southern Europe. He thought the Allies might attack Sicily, but he didn't think it'd be the main target. They'll go for Sardinia or Corsica first, he told his staff. Sicily's too obvious. So he split his forces, 60,000 German troops in Sicily, mostly the 15th Panzer Grenadier Division and the Fallschirmjäger, 1st Parachute Division, elite soldiers, called Green Devils, by the Allies, and 140,000 Italian troops. But the Italian soldiers? They were tired. They'd lost North Africa. They didn't want to fight for Mussolini anymore. Many of them hadn't been paid in months, and their weapons were old. Some still used World War I rifles. Mussolini tried to fire them up. He went to Sicily in June 1943, gave a speech in Palermo, the island's capital: "We will defend Sicily to the last man. The Allies will not take 1 inch of our soil." But the crowd just stood there, silent. No cheers, no flags, just tired faces. One Italian private, Giovanni Rossi, wrote in his diary, "Mussolini talks about glory, but I haven't had a hot meal in a week. If the Allies come, I'm not fighting. I want to go home to my wife and kids." That's the secret the Axis didn't want to admit. Sicily's defenses weren't just weak, they were hollow. Back to July 9, 1943, midnight. The storm's getting worse. Tom's landing craft is bouncing so hard he hits his head on the metal frame. He looks around, the other guys are quiet, some praying, some staring at their rifles. Joe, the sergeant, pulls out a photo of his wife and kids, wipes the water off it. "First time in combat?" Joe asks Tom. Tom nods. "Yeah. My dad fought in World War I, said it's hell. But he also said you gotta stick with your buddies." Joe smiles. "Smart man. That's how you survive." At 12:30 a.m., the captain yells, 2 miles out. "Get ready." The soldiers stand up, grab their gear. Tom checks his rifle, loads a clip, makes sure the safety's off. The boat slows down. He hears the sound of planes overhead, Allied bombers, hitting German positions on the beach. The sky lights up with explosions, orange and red, reflecting on the water. Then, the ramp drops. "Go! Go! Go!" the captain yells. Tom jumps into the water, cold, up to his waist, and runs toward the beach. Bullets zip past his head, crack crack crack, in the air. He dives behind a rock, heart pounding. He looks up, other soldiers are hitting the beach, some falling, some firing back. "Murphy! Over here!" Joe yells, waving from a sand dune. Tom runs over, slides into the sand. He looks around, the beach is chaos. Allied landing craft are being hit by German artillery, one blows up, sending flames 50 feet into the air. Soldiers are yelling, medics are carrying wounded men to boats. But the Italian soldiers? Most of them are running away. Some are dropping their weapons and putting their hands up. "See that?" Joe says, pointing to a group of Italian soldiers surrendering. "They don't want to fight. The Krauts are the ones we gotta watch out for." Tom nods. He stands up, fires a few shots toward the German bunker he sees in the distance. A bullet hits the bunker's wall, sparks flying. He ducks back down, heart racing. This is war. Messy, loud, terrifying. But for Tom and the other Allies, it's just the start. The Allied plan for Sicily was simple, split into 2 armies. The British 8th Army, led by Montgomery, would land on the eastern coast, near Syracuse, and push north to Messina, the city at the narrowest part of Sicily, just 2 miles from Italy's mainland. The U.S. 7th Army, led by Patton, would land on the western coast, near Gela, and protect Montgomery's left flank, then push north to Palermo. But Patton had other plans. He was a proud, aggressive general, he hated losing, and he hated being second to Montgomery. When he saw how weak the Italian defenses were, he decided to speed up. "Why protect Montgomery's flank when we can take Palermo first?" he told his officers. So on July 10, Patton's troops, mostly tank units, started moving fast. They bypassed small German outposts, drove through villages, and met almost no resistance from the Italians. On July 12, they took the town of Licata. On July 15, they captured Agrigento. By July 22, just 12 days after landing, Patton's soldiers marched into Palermo. Tom was with Patton's army. He remembers walking into Palermo's main square, shops were closed, windows broken, but the people were coming out of their houses, waving white flags. A little girl handed him a loaf of bread. He didn't speak Italian, but he smiled and said, "Grazie." "That's when I knew we were winning," Tom said later. "The people didn't fear us. They were happy we were there." Montgomery, meanwhile, was moving slower. His army ran into the German Green Devils, the 1st Parachute Division, near Catania, a city on the eastern coast. The Green Devils were tough, they dug trenches, set up machine gun nests, and used artillery to stop the British advance. For 2 weeks, the British and Germans fought in the hills around Catania. Men died by the hundreds. Harry Smith, a British private with Montgomery's army, wrote in his letter home, "The Krauts are good, they shoot straight, and they don't give up. But we're better. We have more guns, more planes, and we know we're fighting for something. Finally, on July 31st, the British broke through the German lines. Montgomery's troops marched into Catania. Now, the Allies had Sicily's two biggest cities, Palermo and Catania. The Axis was trapped. Kesselring knew the game was over. By early August, the Allies were closing in on Messina. The German and Italian troops in Sicily were running out of food, fuel, and ammo. The Allied Air Force was bombing their supply lines, no ships could get into Messina with supplies, and no one could get out except by boat. Kesselring made a tough decision: retreat. He ordered his troops to pull back to Messina, then cross the narrow strait to Italy's mainland. He wanted to save as many German soldiers as possible, they'd be needed to defend Italy. The retreat started on August 1st. The Germans used ferries, small boats, even rafts to move their men across the strait. They left behind their heavy weapons, tanks, artillery, trucks, but they took their best soldiers. The Italian troops. Most of them were left behind. Giovanni Rossi, the Italian private, surrendered to a British soldier on August 5th. I told him I just wanted to go home, Giovanni said later. He gave me a cigarette, said I'd be sent to a POW camp in Egypt. It was better than fighting. Patton and Montgomery raced to Messina, each wanted to be the first to take the city. Patton's troops moved fast, taking small towns along the way. Montgomery's army took the main road. On August 17, Patton's soldiers reached Messina first. They raised the American flag over the city hall. Tom was there. He stood in the square, watching the flag go up. Joe, the sergeant, put his arm around him. "We did it, kid. Sicily's ours." Tom nodded, tears in his eyes. He thought about the guys who didn't make it, his friend Mike, who was shot on the first day of landing, the medic who died carrying a wounded man to safety. "Yeah," he said. "We did it for them." When Montgomery's troops arrived an hour later, Patton was waiting for him. They shook hands, but Patton's smile said it all: he'd won the race. By the time the invasion ended, the Allies had lost about 23,000 men, killed, wounded, missing. The Axis had lost 160,000, 130,000 of them captured, mostly Italian, 30,000 killed or wounded. The Allies had taken Sicily. But the Germans had escaped, about 40,000 soldiers made it to Italy. Eisenhower wasn't upset. "We didn't just take Sicily," he said. "We broke Mussolini. And we made Hitler send 10 divisions from Russia to Italy. That's a win." The invasion of Sicily changed World War II forever. Let's break down why it mattered. First, it ended Italy's role in the war, sort of. On July 25, 1943, just 15 days after the Allied landing, Mussolini was arrested by the Italian king. The new Italian government, led by Pietro Badoglio, started secret talks with the Allies. On September 8, 1943, Italy surrendered. But the Germans didn't leave, they took over Italy's defense. So the Allies had to fight their way up Italy's mainland, a long, bloody campaign that lasted until 1945. But still, the Axis powers were split. Germany was now fighting alone. Second, it took pressure off the Soviet Union. Hitler had to send 10 divisions from the Eastern Front, where they were fighting the Soviets, to Italy to stop the Allies. That meant fewer German soldiers fighting the Soviets at Stalingrad and Kursk. The Soviets pushed back, and the Eastern Front started to collapse. Third, it taught the Allies how to fight big amphibious invasions. Operation Husky was the biggest invasion of World War II up to that point: 470,000 soldiers, 1,600 ships, 1,800 planes. The Allies learned how to coordinate air, land, and sea forces. They learned how to supply a large army on an island. They learned from their mistakes, like the confusion on the first day of landing. All of that knowledge would be used 2 years later, in June 1944, for the D-Day invasion of Normandy. But for the soldiers who fought in Sicily, guys like Tom, Joe, Harry, Giovanni, it was more than just a military success. It was about survival. It was about going home. Tom went home in 1945, after fighting in Italy and France. He married his high school sweetheart, had 3 kids, and became a farmer like his dad. He never talked much about the war, but he kept the loaf of bread the little girl in Palermo gave him, dried up, in a glass case on his mantel. Harry went back to England, worked as a mechanic. He kept writing to the family of his best friend, who died in Catania. He told them their son was a hero. Giovanni went home to his wife and kids. He got a job in a factory, never talked about being a soldier. But every July 10th, he'd light a candle for the men who died in Sicily, Allied and Axis. Kesselring was captured by the Allies in 1945. He was put on trial for war crimes. He ordered the bombing of civilian areas in Italy, but he was released in 1952. He died in 1960, never apologizing for his role in the war. Mussolini was rescued by German commandos in September 1943, and set up a puppet government in northern Italy. But in April 1945, as the Allies closed in, he tried to escape to Switzerland. He was captured by Italian partisans, executed, and his body was hung upside down in a square in Milan. The people of Italy cheered, they'd finally rid themselves of the dictator who'd led them into war. Today, Sicily is a peaceful island. Tourists go there for the beaches, the food, pasta alla norma, cannoli, the ancient ruins, Greek temples in Agrigento, Roman mosaics in Piazza Armerina. But if you look closely, you can still see the scars of the war, a bullet hole in a church wall, a monument to the soldiers who died, a plaque in Messina that says, July 10 to August 17, 1943, here, the Allies began the end of World War II. Every year on July 10, veterans from the US, Britain, Canada, and Italy gather in Sicily. They shake hands, tell stories, and lay flowers at the war memorials. Tom went once, in 1993, 73 years old, walking with a cane. He met a German veteran who fought in the Green Devils. They didn't speak the same language, but they hugged. That's what the war taught me, Tom said later. We were all just kids, fighting for something we thought was right. But in the end, peace is what matters. The invasion of Sicily wasn't the biggest battle of World War II. It wasn't the bloodiest. But it was one of the most important. Because it showed the world that the Axis powers could be beaten. It showed that when countries work together, America, Britain, Canada, Free French, they can overcome even the strongest enemies. And it showed that even in the darkest times, there's hope for peace. So the next time you eat a cannoli, or look at a map of the Mediterranean, remember Sicily. Remember the soldiers who landed there in 1943. Remember the storm that helped them win. And remember that freedom isn't free, it's paid for by the men and women who fight for it. That's the legacy of Operation Husky. That's why we'll never forget.